throughout this summer, I was in Uganda, as Haley said, and one of the biggest themes that shined through almost every experience that I had was privilege and fate, and how these two things intertwine in life. And I not only thought about how my fate was so different from some of the people that I met in Uganda, but I also saw how the fate of people that I met there was so different, and that was all dependent on conditions in their lives, just as our fate is dependent on conditions in our lives. While I was there, I was reading many books, but one of them was by Paulo Coelho, and one day when I was reading, I wrote down a quote from one of his books in my journal. This is my journal from Uganda. So it's July 19th, and I wrote, "I walk about the streets and look at all the people, and I wonder if they choose their lives, or were they, like me, chosen by fate." So this is from his book called 11 Minutes. On my first day at UEFA, I came to the center after thankfully showering after my 20-hour transit period, and arrived at the center only to find a dozen kids running around playing. It was holiday, there were no classes that day. And two girls were just so present for me. On the first day I wrote about them in my journal, and their characters and their personalities just really stood out and continued to stand out throughout the majority of my experience. These two girls were both 8 years old. They were both from Ugandan families that were local to the area that I was in. And one lived in a house across the street from the school with a family with several siblings and two parents. And one lived behind the school in an apartment with her two siblings and her mother. These two girls were very similar in many ways. They both had similar passions. They were both very feminine and very into my dresses and playing with my hair. And they were both just so passionate about learning and about having me read to them and talking about important things as at the age of 8. And this to me just was so instrumental in seeing passion within young kids. And I was just so happy to interact with them and get to know them on a personal level. But their fates were so different. And this struck me, and this kind of tore me apart for a while. While the one who lived across the street with her family was enrolled at UEFA in primary 3, she was one of the class prefects. She got exemplary grades, and she was on the track to go to at least a secondary level of education, as her sisters were enrolled in while I was there. And she was a natural born leader. I could hear her voice among the other children, just in the playground. And then there was the other girl, equally passionate, equally vocal, equally capable of being an excellent leader, but she wasn't enrolled in school. Despite the fact that UEFA, who not only targeted HIV-positive youth, but just orphans and vulnerable children in general who should have deserved an equal education opportunity, and which provided very low school fees, especially compared to others in the area. She wasn't enrolled in school because her family couldn't afford UEFA's fees. And she possessed this same passion, this same desire to go to school just as the other girl did. She would sit outside during school hours after it began and wait for me to come outside on breaks and talk to her for 5 minutes. She would ask me to bring out books from class and read with her just so she could have the chance, while another girl, her same age, her best friend, was in the classroom. She would be sitting outside of the window watching me teach a class. And this broke my heart a little bit. And not because, everybody deserves equal education opportunities, because I believe that they do. And this is something that I became very passionate about this summer. But because two girls who grew up in the same environment, who were from the same town, who lived across the street from each other, who lived next door to the same school, were not able to access those education opportunities just because they happened to be born into a different family. They happened to live in a different house. Their parents happened to not have a job while the others did. And what control did they have over that? I began applying this concept of how their fate and how their future were intertwined at the very beginning, but I continue to do so now. I think about what they had control over and what they didn't. There were times when, in life, when we do have the opportunity to take our fate into our own hands, and when we do have the opportunity to enhance our future in different ways. And some of those instances do lie in education, and we're presented with those opportunities on a very regular basis in this environment at Brandeis. But just because these two girls were faced with different opportunities at such a young age, their lives will be completely different. While one will most likely continue to secondary education, will most likely become a teacher, which is what she aspires to be. The other will most likely, if she is able to get a job at all, she'll probably work in a market down the street. She isn't able to embrace opportunities just because of this situation, and applying that to other instances throughout the world and even here is really important to me in terms of, considering other people's opportunities in lives and other people's paths. And it's really important to me not to judge those and to take fate into consideration. So that's really something that I've been thinking about and something that I've been passionate about for the past 6 months or so since I got to Uganda.